keep it like that so I'm not like lopsided. Is it kind of focused? Yes? We're good?
I think so.
You think so? Okay. So anyway, it's in part for Moyer's kids. She's gone today, but any initial questions or concerns?
Are you going to end your video with like and subscribe to your channel?
I can like really zoom in and say something about my YouTube channel. Like smash that like button.
Yeah.
Like that? I could do that. I need a catchphrase.
To an extent, one time.
Sarah, yes, what can I do for you?
Quiz is next Thursday, correct?
Next Friday. Next Thursday is another major grade. Huh? That's the next. All right, here we go. We left off with the Spanish-American War. There's not much to it. It's 3 month long, very basic. We fight, we win, we're strong. We negotiate the end of this, and we get quite the prize. Take a look at this Treaty of Paris. Yes, it's another Treaty of Paris. You're smart. You can figure out the difference between the Treaty of Paris 1783, the Treaty of Paris 1898, Treaty of Paris. There's a lot of them, right? But when you're writing this, or if you've written Cuba was freed from Spanish rule, zero in on what you've written already and do this around the word freed. Cuba was freed from Spanish rule because guess what?
No, it wasn't.
We kind of get to oversee anything and everything they do. Or throw a big old asterisk next to that statement if you prefer asterisks. But look, we get Puerto Rico and Guam, quite the prize. We still have them today. We're gaining territory. Our vast empire is growing and growing. We even get the Philippines. We did pay for it, yes. And remember the controversy surrounding our annexation of the Philippines. It barely passed through Congress. But what, by the way, was controversial about annexing the Philippines? Why?
Because we be taking away their freedom and we didn't give them freedom.
Well, simply said, they don't want to be part of us. The Philippines wanted independence, so that Filipino revolutionary fighting for Philippine independence, Emilio Aguinaldo, you remember him?
Mm-hmm.
So he's fighting for independence. We stay, we go, we don't grant their independence. So that was kind of the hypocritical actions. We're not allowing them to be independent. In fact, when they fight us, we kind of destroy them en masse, as you saw by those numbers yesterday. And again, we flex our muscles, and basically the rest of today, we are flexing our muscles. You'll see how we do so kind of internationally as we continue our worldwide tour. So far, so good? You with me? Okay, so again, this war, I might have mentioned yesterday, our Secretary of State, John Hay, called it a splendid little war. Because it's short, we win with ease. And as for the death tolls, we lost 500 guys in battle. That's like nothing, especially compared to our previous war. We lost 50,000 at Gettysburg. We lost like up to 1 million if you count both the North and the South, and death from disease in the Civil War. We lost 500 in battle here. So, ooh, that splendid little war. But if you dig deeper, we actually lost another 5,000 from sickness, from disease, from malaria, and in part getting sick from eating the food that was given to the troops. Keep in mind, we're fighting this thing in the Philippines, we're fighting it in Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, all over. And sometimes, what happens to meat if it's away from us? It doesn't spoil, though, if you douse it with chemicals or if you eat embalmed beef, which is what the troops were fed.
What is that?
It's, embalmed like formaldehyde type solution to kill the stink and the putrid taste. It's like chemical doused meat, which you still eat it, you get really sick. So a lot of the troops end up getting just horribly sick. Some die, some don't. But this thing has some lasting consequences. So I need to pause for a second on embalmed beef and zero in on one of those top Rough Riders who was exposed to it, seeing all of his boys also get sick. Teddy Roosevelt, the guy who becomes president. When Teddy Roosevelt is president, a landmark book is written by Upton Sinclair. Upton Sinclair writes The Jungle. The Jungle exposes all of the horrors of the meatpacking industry. How like there's meat piled in a room, rotting, rats are eating it, rats die on the meat, it's all ground up, sent out for human consumption. how all that meat had chemicals in it. Europe has standards, they reject it, we eat it anyway. So just keep that context down, because when Teddy is president, he vividly remembered the embalmed beef, and you know what he does about it? Signs into law the Pure Food and Drug Act with the vivid memory of embalmed beef. So I'll go back to that story, but if you want to think of a motivating factor for him, the Pure Food and Drug Act makes the government inspect the meat, making sure that you're not eating like formaldehyde beef, because that would just be gross, right? We also have guys dying from, mosquito bites, this and that, but we don't really know it's from mosquitoes yet. More on that in a second.
What's formaldehyde?
Another impact of the war. Remember, and this will be a good kind of review style question, remember that Republican get out the vote tactic? Telling you about Andersonville, telling you how bad the Confederacy was. They were doing that 1884, 1888. They kept reminding you how bad the Civil War was. What was that Republican get out the vote tactic?
Waving the bloody shirt.
Waving the bloody shirt. Now we're healed. By 1898, we're back. North and South fought together. That wound is kind of, no longer fresh. We no longer wave the bloody shirt, and we kind of move on, kind of holding hands from this point forward. We're in the club. At least Europe recognized us. I again argue that we've always been imperialist, but we just defeated one of their own. The once almighty Spain, well, we took them out. Europe then recognizes us as being in that cool kid club, so we're imperialist, we've got our territory. Alfred Thayer Mahan's thesis is clearly validated as well, right? He argues what? That you need a strong navy to win wars?
Yes.
Yeah.
Guess what won us all those battles?
Strong navy.
Strong navy.
Bingo. So we double down on that, and we build up our navy more and more and more over the coming years. Even up to the modern day, do we still have a strong navy?
Yes.
Yes.
Second strongest military.
But then we get some question marks. Now that we've acquired this territory around the globe, we've got Puerto Rico, we've got Guam, we've got the Philippines. Do they get citizenship?
No.
Why not?
They're not a
It's
force.
challenged in the courts. And it's kicked around the court system for 2 years, and eventually the Supreme Court says, no, the Constitution does not follow the flag. So I'll give you the name of that court case in the coming slides, but if you can just kind of remember that term, the Constitution does not follow the flag. That'll summarize the 1,000-page legal jargon that was written about citizenship and our territories. So there's a whole lot of legal stuff, but in short, the Constitution doesn't follow the flag. Then there's the Cuba situation. This one's complicated because Cuba's been a country we've always wanted. We tried to take it from Spain. Remember that thing in the 1850s? Ostend Manifesto. We tried to buy it for $100 million. Spain said no. We threatened to go to war to take it. Well, now we just liberated them. Do we take it?
Yes.
Oh, that's complicated. And here's why. When we declared war, there was an amendment to our declaration of war called the Teller Amendment. This is really easy for you to remember because the Teller Amendment tells the world we're fighting for Cuba's freedom. So it's an announcement. We proclaim we are fighting for Cuba's independence. We will allow Cuba to be free. We fight the war, we win the war, but then we revise it. The Platt Amendment is in the aftermath of it, and Cuba's freedom, we then realized that they shouldn't be totally free. In fact, we just kind of liberated them, so they need to reward us with a naval base, least at $1 a year. What's our naval base that we eventually get in Cuba and we still have today? Guantanamo Bay. Have you heard of Guantanamo
Yes.
Bay? This is when we get it. Today it's a prison. Today Guantanamo is a very complicated prison where we house a lot of the alleged terrorists. So that's maybe the context in which you've learned of Guantanamo, but we got it through this Platt Amendment. In addition, this Platt Amendment says that we get to oversee everything that Cuba does. If they have an election, we get to approve it. If their economy is not going the way we want it to, we get to manage their treasury. In short, the Platt Amendment makes us big brother of Cuba. We are the protector, we are the overseer, we are the boss. Cuba's got to do everything that we say. So Cuba's freedom is not really free. And that will result in some really ugly long-term problems in that country. So they become dominated by the United States, and a lot of Cubans don't want to be dominated by the United States, especially when our businesses create all of these opportunities for them, but they fail to pass that on to the Cuban people. So by the 1950s, there's a movement brewing in Cuba where they want to kick out all these American companies that are dominating them, and they want to give it to the Cuban people. Help me out here, because who is that communist having a revolution by 1959? That's Fidel Castro, in part created from the conditions stemming from right here. And as you guys pay attention, you're going to see a whole lot of connections to this modern day stuff. We're talking problems in Central America and Latin America, discontent from Latin America towards us. So much of it is stemming from the early 20th century, as I'm hoping you're starting to connect the dots here. So yes, the Platt Amendment, blah, 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 blah. We get to oversee everything they do. There it is in words. You summarized. You're smart. There's the name of the court cases. The insular cases simply says no, the Constitution does not automatically follow the flag. So just if you see insular cases, no, they don't get guaranteed citizenship. It's got to come later. It's got to be complicated. It's still very complicated, especially if you look at like the Puerto Rico situation today. They are citizens, but still there's some kind of complications behind that. What else do we have? Ooh, the Philippines. Remember how complicated this is? We've got like a 3-4 year ugly guerrilla war. And remember some of the tactics that we're using to stop that insurrection against us? The most notable of which is waterboarding. So again, waterboarding is kind of torture-like, where we get them to submit, surrender, we then annex it with a whole lot of debate, and we put this guy as the first governor of the Philippines. I'm thinking you might even recognize him by his look, by his picture, because he does become a president. He's known as the heaviest president. That's Taft. So Taft gets his big political boost as the first governor of the Philippines. Katarina, what?
Didn't he hate being president?
He did hate being president.
Like a Supreme Court,
He did become a Supreme Court justice. He hated being president, and they say that he was depressed, and he sometimes ate out of the depression. And then he eventually did a whole lot better when he was on the Supreme Court. The only ex-president ever to go on the Supreme Court, by the way, for your fun fact. So look at us, our American Eagle, and there are all sorts of these pro-imperialism cartoons showing our vast empire. Uncle Sam is the new Cecil Rhodes. They have Africa, we've got the Pacific. So understand that there's a bunch of this pro-imperialism stuff, but on the closing question today, you'll see how this is clearly anti-imperialism. Remember, we're at like a 60-40, 55-45 split. We go the imperialist route, but there are still notable voices in opposition that you guys have to keep in mind. The anti-imperialists that you're going to see, they've got some pretty interesting complaints about this new role of the United States. What year is all this happening again? What's our...
1898.
1898. So 1898, we flex our muscles. We'll continue to flex our muscles as you see, but we need to refocus quickly on American politics because something's right around the corner in 1900. An election. So we got to cover one election, a pretty interesting election, because it has TR, Teddy Roosevelt, as the vice presidential candidate under William McKinley. So TR is new. He's kind of promoted, and we'll explain that in a bit. But in the election of 1900, you've got William McKinley, the incumbent, still backed by multi-millionaire businessman Mark Hanna, up against William Jennings Bryan. Now, what was WJB's big old campaign thing in 1896? Cross of gold, free silver, right? Yeah, they kind of threw that out now. Now WJB, you know what he's all about? Anti-imperialism. So the entire monetary debate was kind of a, 19th century thing. Now that we're in the 20th century, we'll see a few other factors take shape, and now he is anti-imperialist. So that's his thing. Philippines, bad. Imperialism, bad. Don't go this route. He's an anti-imperialist. So it's McKinley with Teddy Roosevelt up against WJB. I need to quickly tell you the story of why Teddy is fast-tracking his way through the political arena, moving all the way up to VP. Let me first ask you, what's the VP do?
He's there in case something happens.
In other words, nothing, right? That's why Teddy gets the vice presidency. Why? Because he's shaking things up in New York. And remember, he's fast-tracking on his political career. He was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, resigned that to go fight in Cuba with the Rough Riders. He was then a national hero. He's on every poster. They're writing books about Teddy. He made a big name for himself, and he easily won being governor of New York. Well, Teddy shakes things up when he's governor, and he quickly starts to regulate the old political machines, both the Democratic one, give me the name of the Democratic political machine, Tammany Hall, and the Republican political machine with Boss Platt. So he's regulating both Democrats and Republicans. So New York gets the idea, let's get this guy out of being governor, let's get him to this nothing position of vice president, lock him in his office, shut the door, and then he'll basically do nothing, right? Did I ever give you the quote about the vice presidency from Cactus Jack Garner?
No.
Cactus Jack, he's a Texan. Of course, he's Texan with the nickname Cactus Jack. But if you're familiar with Garner State Park, this is Cactus Jack. Cactus Jack Garner was the vice president under FDR in the 1930s. Cactus Jack hated the vice presidency. In fact, one of his quotes is still around today in describing how terrible it was. He says, the vice presidency is not worth a warm bottle of piss.
Dang.
Yeah, that kind of made its way in the history books there, but he hates the vice presidency, says it's powerless, says you don't do anything unless the person dies. Well, Mark Hanna was kind of afraid of that. Mark Hanna hated Teddy Roosevelt. Why? Because Teddy Roosevelt shakes things up. He might regulate business. By the way, he regulates business. So Mark Hanna calls Teddy a wild-eyed madman and says that damn cowboy's one heartbeat away from the presidency. Well, 6 months into McKinley's second term, he's at a railroad station. A crazy anarchist from Europe, Leon Skolgaz, happens to assassinate McKinley, and TR takes the prize. So TR is then going to be a new type of president, an imperial president, a powerful president. And kind of think of it this way. Those guys prior, go McKinley and Cleveland and Harrison and who? And Cleveland and Arthur. And like, you're forgetting these guys, right? If I ask you, what do they do?
Nothing.
You might be able to say, well,
The Pendleton Act?
there's the Pendleton Act, there's like a bunch of laissez-faire. Teddy, we've got like books and books and books written just on the international and the domestic stuff that he does. So Teddy is going to be a new type of ultra-strong imperial president that will totally change the role of the United States. So today we'll focus on him internationally. Next week we look at him domestically with his progressive kind of rocking the boat type stuff. Worldwide tour, we're back in China. Why China? Because we're going to flex our muscles and we want to get in the club and we want to play the game that everyone else was doing in China. Case in point, Britain. What were the Brits doing to the Chinese for like forcing opium down their throats? So as you get towards the latter part of the 19th century, the rest of the world is also carving up China. But is that Lady Liberty, is she on the outside looking in? Does she want to play as well? Because again, China's got a lot of people. China's got a lot of potential, I don't know, people to buy our stuff or maybe things that we want to buy. So we get crafty with Teddy Roosevelt's Secretary of State, who's going to get our foot in the door and let us play with China as well. He writes something called the Open Door Note. The Open Door Note is then sent to all the European powers, and it basically says that China should be an open door and all countries should have equal trade access with China. These rest of these European countries who already have control over China are like, yeah, whatever, John Hay, we're not going to let you in. So they either laugh at him, don't respond, or flat out say no. John Hay then interprets that as a yes, and it becomes our open door policy where we move in. He gets crafty and creative with their denials and says, okay, yeah, so we're going to go ahead and move in now, and we basically do move into China. So the open door policy, that gets our foot in the door. And by the way, those other European countries, they kind of have to listen to us now. Why?
Big strong.
Because we have a navy, we flex our muscles. We got a military, we won a war, we defeat Spain. So just kind of think, we're moving in. And look what's holding up that door. The U.S. Army and Navy prestige. So we do start moving in. This, by the way, is a story that you know from last year. We move in, the world is already in, China's being exploited forever, and there's a group of Chinese people that's sick of it, and they basically have the slogan to kill foreign devils, and they launch a major rebellion. Help me out, All-Stars, what's the name of this rebellion?
I don't remember.
Dude, that was like a year ago.
It was like a year ago, but you remember this.
No.
Opium Rebellion. Chinese
Punch-
boxing
boxing.
rebellion.
The Boxer Rebellion, there you go.
Oh my
Now
God.
are you putting the pieces together?
This is a flashback.
So the Boxer Rebellion, it's anti-American, it's anti-European, and for about 2 months in China, the Chinese people are attacking the American embassies and attacking any foreigner who is there. But it only lasts 2 months because get this, Uncle Sam comes over in something kind of unique. It's like an international coalition. So Americans join up with the Germans, with the British, with the French, with the Italians, and like we got this international force to put down the Chinese revolt.
How long was it?
55 days. There's a movie about it if you're interested in old movies. 55 Days at Peking. No, I won't ask you to remember the name of that movie. But maybe you're looking for like a fun weekend activity and you all want to go to somebody's house and watch this old movie from like the 1950s. You can say, hey, we're going to watch this movie on the Boxer Rebellion. It's going to be awesome.
Sure we are.
Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, International Peacekeeping Organization puts down a Chinese revolt, which is kind of weird because aren't the Chinese people fighting exploitation? They keep getting exploited. Just like the Opium Wars, it's a continuation of it, and the 20th century and China, it's not going to be the greatest century for them. Just kind of understand what will develop. By the 1930s, Japan moves in. Japan does some bad stuff. They're then in civil war throughout like the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And by the 50s, who takes over in China? Communist Mao. And how's that going to work out for them?
Like millions upon millions of people are going to starve.
Millions upon millions will starve from his messed up policies. So the history of China, it's kind of complex, but that's a big part of it there. Ready to move around the globe a little bit? So worldwide tour, we're now in Panama, which is tricky because Panama is not Panama. Panama becomes Panama in this time period. I gotta get into your geography mastery here. This is the country that controls that region. Colombia. So this is simply part of Colombia. So that was part of Colombia. I gotta tell the story here, and a lot of this relates to a canal. Don't stress this treaty. I just got to give you some context on the treaty process of building a canal. We planned one since the 1850s, but in the 1850s, we're not the superpower that we are now. In fact, if we were to build a canal, we kind of had to do it with the Brits. So it's like, all right, hey, us and British, let's build it through Nicaragua. Let's maybe go through here. And we just talk and talk and talk about it. Because remember, 1850s, our nation's getting torn apart. Then, of course, there's a civil war, 1870s depression, and the time was never right to just build that canal. So plans were there, but still, if we wanted to build a canal, we had to do it with the Brits. And that's complicated. So now that we win the Spanish-American War, we sign a new treaty that negates this treaty. This one says, we strong now, we're going to build a canal on our own. Don't stress the names of those treaties. Just kind of recognize them of having something to do with canals. And again, think of our newfound independence and our strength, and that's going to play a role with how we build this actual canal through Panama. Much of it stems from this guy, Felipe Bunau Varilla. Yes, you need to know his story. Yes, you need to know his name, know his home country.
Colombia?
It's not Colombia. Felipe Bunau Varilla. It's French. Philippe, French. So he's French, and get this, he owns the canal construction company that's going to build one through Panama. So he lobbies the United States. He goes to Congress and says, hey, I got a great canal for you. you guys want this canal through Panama, it's going to be awesome. He's looking to make millions of dollars if the canal is actually built through Panama. So we kind of go with that idea, and we're like, cool, we'll build a canal through Panama, but we got to get permission first. Who again owned Panama, controlled Panama? Colombia. So we ask Colombia, we say, hey, we'd like to build a canal through this nice little region here. What do you say? And Colombia says?
Nope.
No.
Colombia says, no way. So this is when things get shady. He then hires a few mercenaries, calls up the US, we bring in our Navy, our strong, powerful Navy, we point the guns at Colombia, and this guy declares Panamanian independence.
Yeah.
What can Colombia do?
Not much.
They kind of let it happen. So Panama declares its independence, and guess who the new leader of Panama is going to be? Felipe Unal a Frenchman, puts himself in charge of leadership, and then we sign our canal construction treaty with this guy. So it's called the Hay-Bunal-Varilla Treaty. As soon as Panama declared its independence, we recognized their independence. Keep in mind, we kind of forced it, instigated it, little bit shady if you look into the detail here. Teddy, he's behind a lot of this. He said he was going to make dirt fly. In fact, his famed quote is, I took the canal zone, then I let Congress debate it. So he's kind of acknowledging the, let's say, shadiness behind the acquisition of all of that territory. And that's the one treaty that I would argue you need to remember. The Hay-Bunal-Varilla Treaty. And just think of some of the, I don't know, moral issues behind that, which are somewhat questionable, to say the least. We eventually realized that we, dodge some morals and do some, shady stuff. So we eventually gave the canal back to Panama in 1999. So, yeah, they got it back eventually. We kind of said sorry. We apologized for a lot of that in the 1970s, so it takes us some time to do it. But we did acknowledge that, whoops, stuff was a little bit controversial, to say the least.
This quote reminds me of Andrew Jackson when he says John Marshall's made his legacy,
No.
now let him enforce it.
Some comparisons with a strong president there. As for the actual construction, if you want to change gears a little bit and think like how the state of Texas, your EOC exam will take this, EOC loves the Panama Canal. It's on like every single test, but sometimes the questions are like the most straightforward ever. They're gonna make you laugh or smile at least as you're taking it. Now the stumper that they put on 2 years ago, get this, I'm gonna describe the question. Every question has a picture, a box, a newspaper title or something, and there was a picture of a guy, and it told you this guy is in the Panama Canal Zone, 1904. This guy had goggles, a backpack, and some sort of device that was like shooting out smoke. And the question was, what is he doing? Choice A, he's a firefighter. Choice B, he's using mustard gas against the Germans. Choice C, he's fumigating for mosquitoes. Or choice D, he is a Ghostbuster. I don't know, whatever. But like the choices are so ridiculous, and like, okay, I'm gonna apply some logic here, and what could this guy be doing?
Mosquitoes?
Fumigating for mosquitoes. We finally figured out that mosquitoes bite you and you get sick. So it's like we've got a few Navy guys, military guys that have put 2 and 2 together. So now we start fumigating for mosquitoes, and we've kind of made that realization from that point forward, yes? So anyway, we build. The locks are another way the state of Texas asked the question, like, how do you get through elevation changes? A lock is like a chamber, water goes in there, and the boat can move like up and down through hundreds of different feet of elevation changes. Good stuff. Now TR is really gonna like bulk up this Monroe Doctrine that's been on the books. Again, we're showing our might, we're showing our force. We've got a strong military, we're flexing our muscles. So Roosevelt adds something to the Monroe Doctrine. Remember, the Monroe Doctrine as it is, it says Europe stay out. Now we kind of back this up with our military might. In fact, I can probably sum it up for you in 2 words and then follow that up and explain it for you. But the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine allows us, ready for my 2 words? Preemptive intervention. Wow, why are they saying 2 complicated words? Preemptive intervention.
How do you spell preemptive?
do the best you can. We're going to intervene before something happens, which basically opens the door for near constant intervention, because get this, we might think that Europe is going to oversee, say, Santo Domingo, because Santo Domingo's in debt, they owe Europe money. So we can intervene to preempt a difficult situation, and we can take over the government of Santo Domingo if we feel like it. Do we ever utilize this? Do we ever take over Latin American, Central American, South American countries?
Communism scared
Near constantly. So you're going to see we use this Roosevelt corollary with almost constant supervision of the Caribbean over the next, say, 20 years. We'll retreat briefly into isolationism in like the 1920s and 1930s, but oh, the 1950s, wait till that story comes when we start to overthrow just about each and every one of these Latin American countries. So more on that in a bit, but just kind of think of this making us have this new role of policing everything. So we might speak softly and carry a big stick. Don't mess with us. We got a Navy, we got a military. We're going to say we're going to preemptively intervene, and we're going to back that up with force if we need to. By the way, Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy has kind of been nicknamed this big stick diplomacy. So just kind of think, it stems from that quote, speak softly, but carry a big stick. Yeah, we might do that if you mess with us, if you threaten us. If we fear your country's going down the wrong path, we've got that big stick to back it up. We might move in if we need to. So do we police the world from that point forward? Do we police the world today?
Yeah.
Yes and yes. It starts with Teddy. In fact, Teddy gets involved in a war that had been going on, which you'd probably be thinking, what does that have to do with us? It's the Russo-Japanese War. And it's like, all right, that thing I learned in European history, world history. Teddy gets in the middle of it. Our new role to police and mediate everything, Teddy actually negotiates a successful truce between Russia and Japan. There's TR, Russia, Japan. He gets the Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating this truce. But just think about us again today policing certain situations. We'll get involved in a whole lot everywhere, really from this point forward. And by the way, my lecture today ends with events from 2 days ago. So you'll kind of see a direct connection to all of this policing to something that was revealed 2 days ago. More on that in a second. I'm almost done. You ready? Ready? Okay. Oh yeah, victory lap. We show our strength. We build even a newer Navy. We whitewash it, nickname it the White Fleet, and we parade it around the globe. People see it, they like, whoa, wow, new guns, new ships, steam power, wow. We do some like gun blazing, everyone recognizes our power, and it's on this like entire yearly tour of the world. So, hey Asia, look at us. Hey Australia, look at us. Let's go to the Mediterranean, look at us. American might, military, Navy, strong. After Teddy Roosevelt, who's the guy that takes over in 1908?
Frederick, no.
Taft. Taft then changes things to something called dollar diplomacy. I got to take you down kind of a 50-year history here with dollar diplomacy. And it's a little bit connected to the Cuba situation that I previewed for you a second ago. But dollar diplomacy, he encourages American investments in all of these Latin American countries. So let me just kind of preview it by saying, yes, we invest to the point of dominating just about all of these Latin American countries. Mexico has oil, it's American companies that dominate it. Guatemala has fruit plantations, dominated by an American company. And let's maybe just zero in on Guatemala for a second, because we do dominate their entire economy. This United Fruit Company that emerges, that's American owned, is gonna make a ton of money. How's the country of Guatemala gonna do?
Not good.
What's United Fruit paying the Guatemalans?
Not much.
Not much, not good. They are in deep poverty. And a new movement is emerging by the 1950s that's spreading like wildfire that has a solution for this capitalist / imperialist tendency. This idea of communism or socialism is spreading, and Guatemala eventually elects a socialist who says, I'm going to kick out this United Fruit Company. We're going to take all their land holdings, we're going to take their money, and we're going to share that wealth. But by the 1950s, are we going to stand by idly where we watch a foreign country take an American company and divvy up that wealth? This is where things get dicey, because when that happens, we'll overthrow that elected leader and we'll put in a dictator who allows us to stay. But that dictator will not be popular among the Guatemalans, creating continued unrest that I could argue even relates to this very day. We basically do that everywhere. We'll overthrow leaders, overthrow more, keep American companies there, and you create a whole lot of distrust between Latin America and the United States. So it's developing, and by the 1950s, it's getting ugly when we're scared of communism kind of taking our money. So more on that later. Wilson simply tries to shake things up a little bit. I'll say he has nominal success in bringing about moral diplomacy. But I got to show you this, this map of intervention over the coming years. So Wilson's going to try. Wilson's going to be like, all right, hey, the Filipinos, they need some rights. Filipinos get rights. He's going to give citizenship to the Puerto Ricans. So he's acknowledging the misdeeds of the past, bringing about some morals in the situation. But I don't know how much you know about the history of Mexico in the 1910s.
Was there a lot of revolution?
There's a revolution. And this is where we start to stray a little bit from moral diplomacy, because we're going to get involved there. We basically move into Mexico, Pancho Villa. I don't know if you remember any of that, but let's just kind of put it to be continued. Oh, and World War I is also going to be under Wilson's watch. So understand the name for its moral diplomacy. William Jennings Bryan, the Secretary of State, will have some success in implementing it, but there's still going to be intervention and occupation of the Americas at that time. There it is from 1898 to the 1920s. Look, we are everywhere, almost all the time. Does that continue after the 1920s? Yes. We put a little bit of a pause on it, 1920s, 1930s, but then we're back. In the late 20th century, this, by the way, takes us all the way up to 1999. So each and every one of these shows some kind of American role throughout Central America and South America. Whether we have a base, whether we've sent troops, whether we've done something there, maybe to fight drugs, fight whatever, you could argue that we've almost always been there. And if, like I said, I take you to 2 days ago, you guys watch the news, you see John Bolton. John Bolton, security advisor of President Trump, do you know? Did you see that?
I saw that too.
What is it?
All right, so he's about to make a speech about like foreign policy. He's a foreign policy advisor for President Trump, but he had like a whoops. My notebook's facing the wrong way.
Oh my.
The press took a picture of the notebook. Do you see what is written right here?
Something about 5,000 troops.
5,000 troops to where?
Colombia.
So our continued like meddling with Latin America, Central America, South America, it's more of a constant in my kind of eyes. It's like more of the same. So the Trump administration, of course, had to answer a bunch of questions about this. And they were like, well, all options are on the table. And much of this is stemming from the political unrest in Venezuela. I don't know if you're following that, but they've got some crazy turbulence politically with two rival leaders both claiming power. But it's like, maybe we're about to send some troops. So they didn't really fully answer it. But again, if you zoom out and look at the history of the 20th century, my answer would be, what else is new? We've almost always had troops there. We've almost always acted as this police power. So that's that, all the way up to 2 days ago. Hopefully some current events start to make sense when you got a decent understanding of your history.
Yeah.
I got this for you. I do want to look at the political cartoon with you all.